The summer air in Beijing was a furnace. It pressed against the glass panes of Imani Scott's dorm room, curling at the edges of the curtains, making the air thick enough to choke on. Outside, the city sang with its usual chaos. Honking horns, laughter spilling from noodle shops, the tinny sound of bicycle bells echoing against concrete. Students darted across campus, their voices light and excited as suitcases rolled behind them. Some were going home for the summer. Others, like her, were supposed to be returning for good. Imani stared at the flight ticket in her hand until her vision blurred. Her scholarship had ended, her final exams were behind her, and she had earned the right to go home with her head high. The University of Beijing had polished her resume, her professors had written glowing recommendations, and her family back in Atlanta was waiting. She should have been on that plane in 2 days. Instead, the ticket felt like paper mocking her. A symbol of everything she had lost. Her hand drifted lower, resting on her stomach. Still flat, still betraying nothing, but heavier than stone with the truth she carried. Pregnant. The word itself made her stomach twist. She hadn't chosen this. She hadn't planned for it. She hadn't even had the chance to decide what kind of mother she wanted to be. The memory of that phone call haunted her like a bad dream. "Miss Scott, we regret to inform you that there was an incident during your last hospital visit. A clerical error. Someone, mixed up donor records." At first, she hadn't understood. Artificial insemination? She hadn't even signed up for anything like that. She'd gone in for a standard checkup after fainting during class, and somehow, she had been dragged into a nightmare she couldn't wake from. They'd apologized, of course. Offered her compensation, asked her to sign non-disclosure forms. Everything whispered, quiet, smoothed over by practiced voices that didn't care what her future looked like. Imani remembered gripping the edge of the desk so hard her knuckles went white. "Whose?" she tried to ask, her voice breaking. "We cannot disclose the donor's identity," the doctor had replied. "That is strictly confidential." And just like that, her world crumbled. Now she sat staring at the life she was supposed to return to, a neatly folded flight ticket, and realized she couldn't. Her mother would demand answers. People would whisper behind her back. Her siblings would look at her with confusion in their eyes. Pregnant. By whom? Who would believe her if she told them the truth? That a hospital mistake had stolen the choice from her. Imani slid the ticket into the drawer, shut it, and leaned back in her chair. The hum of the city outside seemed to grow louder. She could almost hear it telling her, "You're not leaving. Not yet." The weeks blurred after that. Her savings dwindled quickly, the little stipend from her scholarship gone within a month. With her visa tied to her student status, she couldn't just drift. She needed work, shelter, something that would let her survive until she could figure out what to do. That was when she saw the advertisement. Live-in nanny. Must be fluent in English. Willing to teach child conversational skills. Generous pay. At first, she ignored it. She wasn't a nanny. She was a scientist in training, a woman who dreamed of laboratories and white coats, not lullabies and scraped knees. But then she looked again. Live-in. Room and board. Enough money to keep her afloat. Her hand strayed to her stomach again. She needed this. The car sent to pick her up was sleek and black, its windows tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. The driver, dressed in a sharp suit, bowed his head respectfully as he opened the door for her. "Miss Scott?" he asked. "Yes." Her voice wavered, but she forced her chin up. "Please, this way." The drive through Beijing's bustling streets soon gave way to quieter avenues lined with willow trees. And then, suddenly, they turned into a road that felt like it belonged to another world entirely. Gated, pristine, with carved stone lions guarding the entrance, the property stretched so wide she couldn't see where it ended. The Mingyue Estate. The name was etched in calligraphy on a jade plaque at the gate. The Bright Moon Estate. It radiated wealth without even trying. Her breath caught as the gates opened silently, sliding apart like the doors of a temple. Inside was a courtyard vast enough to swallow her entire neighborhood back home. Curving tiled roofs glinted in the sunlight, lacquered redwood pillars stood tall, and a koi pond shimmered in the center, its waters rippling with flashes of orange and gold. She stepped out of the car, feeling small, out of place, like a single misplaced note in an orchestra. The housekeeper, a tall woman with silver hair bound in a tight bun, met her at the entrance. Her face was stern, but her eyes softened when she saw Imani. "You are the new nanny?" the woman asked in crisp Mandarin. "Yes," Imani replied carefully in Mandarin of her own, though her accent betrayed her foreignness. The woman gave a single approving nod before lowering her voice. "You are here for the young master, Xiao Rui. He does not listen. Do not take it personally if he screams, or throws things, or locks you out." Imani's brows furrowed. "He sounds spirited." The housekeeper's lips twitched as if she wanted to smile but thought better of it. "Spirited. Yes. That is one word for him." Imani's first sight of Xiao Rui came moments later in a sunlit sitting room. The boy stood by the window, his back to them, small hands gripping a toy robot. He didn't turn when the housekeeper called his name. Didn't acknowledge them at all. "Xiao Rui," the housekeeper said again, louder this time. "This is Miss Imani. She will be your new nanny." Silence. The boy finally turned. His dark eyes narrowed in suspicion. His hair fell into his face, his lips pressed into a thin, stubborn line. He couldn't have been more than 7, but he carried himself like a fortress in miniature, walls up, gates locked. Imani swallowed hard, then crouched down to meet his gaze at eye level. "Hi," she said softly. "I'm Imani. I like your toy robot." For a moment, nothing happened. His frown deepened, and she braced herself for the tantrum the housekeeper had warned her about. But instead, Xiao Rui tilted his head slightly, eyes flickering with something she couldn't place. Curiosity. It was a fragile thread, but she clung to it. "I used to have a toy robot too," she added. "Mine was red. Yours looks faster." The boy blinked, then hugged the robot to his chest as if deciding whether or not to trust her with that small piece of himself. Behind her, the housekeeper's gasp was audible. For the first time in weeks, the boy hadn't screamed, hadn't kicked, hadn't turned away. He just looked at Imani. And that was how she got the job. That night, as she unpacked her small suitcase in the modest quarters assigned to her, Imani pressed her hand to her stomach again. For the first time since that dreadful hospital call, a flicker of something stirred in her chest. Not hope, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. What she didn't know was that her presence at the Mingyue Estate had already set threads in motion. Threads that would soon weave her fate tightly with the family whose doors she had just entered. And watching quietly from the shadows of the estate, a man who carried his own secret was already beginning to take notice. The Mingyue Estate was vast enough to swallow Imani whole. She discovered this on her second morning, when the housekeeper handed her a schedule written on paper so thick it felt ceremonial. Breakfast at 7. Piano practice at 9. Mandarin lessons at 11. Lunch at 1. Physical exercise at 3. Dinner at 6. Lights out by 9. It was the schedule of a soldier, not a child. Imani tried not to frown as she read it. She had grown up in a house where mornings meant pancakes if her mother was in a good mood, or cereal if she wasn't. Her siblings had wrestled in front of the TV, fought over who got the bigger portion of eggs. Life had been messy, loud, and alive. Here, the air was so still it seemed afraid to breathe wrong. Xiao Rui must follow this, the housekeeper warned, her tone clipped. But he never does. That is where you come in. Imani's eyes lifted to the boy across the breakfast table. He sat with his arms crossed, glaring at the untouched porridge in front of him. A maid had already tried coaxing him. A tutor had threatened. Nothing worked. "Xiao Rui," Imani said gently, sliding into the seat beside him. "Can I tell you a secret?" His eyes darted toward her, suspicious but curious. "I hate porridge too," she whispered. But if you take 3 bites, I'll tell you about the time I fell off my uncle's goat back home. His lips twitched. Just a little. Then, with exaggerated slowness, he scooped a spoonful of porridge and ate it. The staff gasped softly. Imani leaned closer, lowering her voice. Once upon a time, when I was your age, I thought my uncle's goat could be my noble steed. I named him Thunder. By the time Xiao Rui finished half the bowl, he was giggling so hard he nearly choked. His robot clutched to his chest as he begged. What happened next? Did Thunder throw you off? Imani smiled, relief washing through her. She had won this battle. But when she looked up, she found a pair of eyes watching her from the far end of the dining hall. Xu Liang. He was dressed in a dark suit, crisp and tailored, his cufflinks glinting under the chandelier. He hadn't announced himself. He didn't need to. His presence commanded the room. Even the maids straightened, their hands suddenly busier than before. Imani's heart gave a nervous lurch. She had seen him once before in passing, but this was the first time his gaze fixed on her like a blade. Sharp. Measuring. Eat your breakfast, Rue, Xu Liang said, his voice deep, even. To everyone's shock, the boy obeyed instantly. But his little hand reached out, brushing against Imani's sleeve as if to anchor her there. Xu Liang's eyes caught the gesture, lingered, then shifted to her. You've accomplished what others couldn't, he said smoothly. Interesting. Imani flushed. I just talked to him, that's all. His gaze didn't waver. Sometimes that is all it takes. Then, as silently as he had arrived, he turned and left, leaving the room thick with whispers. Over the next few days, Imani began to learn the rhythms of the estate. Xiao Rui's tantrums were frequent, but she discovered ways to diffuse them. She danced with him in the courtyard when he refused his piano lessons. She sat cross-legged with him on the floor, drawing silly cartoons in his Mandarin workbooks. The staff watched in stunned silence as the boy who had terrorized them for months softened under her care. She has a gift, one maid murmured to another. Or perhaps the young master just likes foreigners, another replied, though her voice carried a note of unease. Imani pretended not to hear. She focused on Xiao Rui, on keeping her secret buried deep. But at night, when she lay in her narrow bed, she couldn't silence the thought that haunted her. What will happen when they find out I'm pregnant? Xu Liang was a man of discipline. His world was measured in contracts, board meetings, and billion-yuan deals. But lately, his focus strayed. Too often, he found his gaze drifting toward the nanny who had so unexpectedly tamed his son. There was something unsettling about her presence. The way she laughed, soft but unafraid, in a house where even adults lowered their voices. The way Xiao Rui clung to her, as though she were the only safe harbor in his storm. And the way she carried herself, with a quiet strength, a resilience that reminded him of someone who had fought battles unseen. It gnawed at him, that resemblance to the faceless woman he had been searching for. The woman carrying his child. One evening, Xu Liang returned late from a meeting. He loosened his tie as he walked down the quiet halls, the echo of his footsteps the only sound. But then he heard it. Laughter. High, bright, unrestrained. He paused outside Xiao Rui's room. Through the half-open door he saw them. Imani sitting cross-legged on the rug, building a tower of blocks with Xiao Rui. The boy's face glowed with joy, his usual scowl replaced by unguarded delight. And there was Imani, her head thrown back in laughter as the tower collapsed, her dark skin gleaming in the lamplight, her smile like something the house hadn't seen in years. For a moment, Xu Liang felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Not just curiosity. Not just suspicion. Something dangerously close to longing. He tightened his grip on the doorframe, forcing the thought away. This was his house. His rules. His secrets. He couldn't afford distractions. Yet as he watched his son fall asleep with Imani humming softly beside him, Xu Liang knew the truth. This woman was more than a nanny. And he intended to find out exactly who she was. The Mingyue Estate had begun to feel less like a palace and more like a cage. Its courtyard stretched wide, its gardens bloomed endlessly, and its marble halls gleamed. But to Imani, there was always a sense of being watched, weighed, measured. Some of that scrutiny came from the staff. Most of it came from him. But today, her attention belonged to the boy. The afternoon sun spilled molten gold into the inner courtyard, where Xiao Rui was supposed to be practicing Tai Chi with his instructor. Instead, the boy had seized a ball and was kicking it hard against the stone walls, his small body vibrating with defiance. "Rui!" the instructor barked. "Enough." The boy ignored him. With a sharp kick, the ball shot across the courtyard and struck a porcelain vase standing sentinel near the wall. The vase toppled and exploded into fragments, scattering like white teeth across the tiles. Gasps filled the air. Two maids rushed forward, their hands wringing, their faces pale. "Young master, this is unacceptable." The instructor raised his voice. "You shame your father with this behavior." But Xiao Rui only jutted out his chin, eyes flashing with pride, daring anyone to strike him down. Imani's instincts flared. She crossed the courtyard, knelt before the boy, and lowered her voice until it was just for him. "Did you see how far that ball went?" she whispered, awe in her tone. Xiao Rui blinked, confusion flickering. "It was strong. Very strong." She tapped his chest lightly. "But you know what's stronger? Using that power to protect, not destroy." The words hovered in the air. His shoulders twitched. Slowly, his eyes darted to the broken vase, then back to her. The maids held their breath. Finally, Xiao Rui mumbled, "Sorry." Not to the instructor. Not to the maids. To her. The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. That night, the kitchen hummed with hushed voices as steam rose from bamboo baskets. The servants crowded near the stoves, ladles pausing mid-air. "She calmed him again," one whispered. "Like magic." "Magic," another scoffed. "Or manipulation. Foreigners have tricks. She's not like the others." He listens to her. He listens too much. The last voice was sharp, fearful. "If Master Su notices, she'll be the one to pay." The air grew thick with unease. The door creaked open. Imani entered, rubbing her stomach absent-mindedly, looking for water. The whispers snapped shut like a door slammed in her face. But their eyes followed her, some with suspicion, others with something dangerously close to admiration. Imani felt their stares prick her back like needles. She tightened her grip on the glass. "I can't let them see through me." Not yet. Xu Liang had heard the whispers too. He stood on the balcony of his private study. The city skyline stretched before him in a haze of lights. A glass of whiskey burned against his palm, untouched. The boy had laughed today. Laughter that had startled the walls themselves. And it was because of her. Her presence unsettled him. The way she bent without breaking, coaxing obedience from Xiao Rui without threats or bribes. The way her laughter softened the house in ways even he could not deny. And there was something else. A shadow that tugged at his memory. The clinic. The paperwork. The one mistake he had been chasing like smoke through his fingers. Could it be her? He clenched the glass harder, veins taut. He could not afford distractions. Yet the thought lodged itself in his chest like a splinter. Imani couldn't sleep. The bed felt too narrow, the silence too loud. She missed the chaos of home, the chatter of siblings, the rickety fan that clicked all night. Here, the stillness pressed on her ribs like a weight. So she wandered, barefoot, cautious, down the moonlit hallways of the estate until she found herself at the library. The room was cathedral-like, dark shelves rising like pillars, heavy curtains muting the glow of the lamps. She breathed in the scent of leather and paper, grounding herself. For a moment, it felt like sanctuary. She reached for a book, its spine gilded and cool under her fingers. She had just cracked it open when a voice sliced through the quiet. "You find comfort in books?" She spun, the book nearly tumbling from her hands. Xu Liang stood in the shadows, jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled, his presence overwhelming even in dishevelment. Her pulse lurched. Sometimes. They don't judge. His eyes narrowed slightly. Unlike people. She hesitated, then nodded. Something like that. Xu Liang stepped closer, unhurried, circling as though testing the air around her. The staff whisper about you. About how the boy obeys no one but you. That is unusual. Her chin lifted, defiance glinting beneath her nerves. Maybe what he needed wasn't more rules. Maybe he needed someone to listen. For the first time his lips shifted, not quite a smile, but something edged, dangerous. You speak boldly for someone in your position. Maybe boldness is the only way to survive in this house, she replied softly, though her heart thudded against her ribs. The words hung between them, charged, electric. Xu Liang's gaze lingered on her face, then her hands clutching the book too tightly, then back to her eyes. For a suspended second, the space between them threatened to close. But he turned away, his voice low and cool again. Do not forget, you are here to serve, not to question. He left her there, trembling, the book heavy in her arms, her breath shallow as if she had just run. Back in his study, Xu Liang poured another drink. The liquid caught the lamplight, but he did not sip it. He saw her eyes in his mind's reflection. Dark, steady, threaded with both fear and courage. Not the look of a servant. Not the look of someone who had surrendered. A foreign girl, stranded, carrying secrets. Pregnant. And yet she reminded him of someone. The faceless woman from the clinic, the one who had vanished into anonymity after the mix-up. His jaw tightened. He had spent months scouring records, searching for that missing link. Now she had appeared in his house, as if fate itself had grown impatient. One thing was certain, Imani Scott was no ordinary nanny. And Xu Liang intended to uncover her truth, even if it meant unraveling his own carefully built world.